The meeting's now recording.
Wonderful. So I call the MWPA Executive Committee meeting of August 5th, 2021 to order. Allison, will you please call the roll to make sure we have a quorum?
Novato Fire District.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
City of Mill Valley.
Here.
Town of Ross.
Here.
City of San Rafael.
Here.
A quorum is present with all 5 members.
Thanks, and welcome all. Item 3, agenda adjustments. Any requests to adjust the order of the agenda? And I am seeing none. This is a time for public expression. Public is welcome to address the executive committee at this time on matters that are not on the agenda and are within the jurisdiction of the committee. And please be advised that pursuant to government code, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take any action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 3 minutes and should be respectful to the community. And please silence your cell phones during the meeting and mute your microphone when not reporting out. Any public interested in making comments?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Well, Mark, this is your opportunity here. Executive Officer's report. We're looking forward to it, Mark.
Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. I was going to say maybe soon we'll get to see each other in person for a change, but who knows what the Delta variant or any other future variants may do with changing that timeline. But I really am looking forward to when we finally get to have an in-person meeting. That'll be nice. Never thought I'd get to a point in my life where I'm looking forward to meetings, but just getting back to be able to see everybody face to face will be great. A fire update for you all. We really, throughout the state, we have 5 significant fires. Some of them are newly emerging for over 400,000 acres that are currently burning. 4 of those fires have containment of 35% or less. 3 of those fires have 0 containment pretty much as they have been newly emerging. The Dixie Fire, which I mentioned at our last board meeting as a 2,000 acre fire, got up and ran for 50,000 acres yesterday. And I forget where I gave a chat about the Dixie Fire. And my concern at the time was that it had gotten to 150,000 acres without a significant wind or without a significant weather driver behind it. And that really worried me that a fire would be burning the way that it was burning without a significant weather driver. Well, yesterday they had the significant weather driver, and that was a dry cold front, which is something that just makes the hair on the back of your neck of any wildland firefighter stand up. And they had single-digit humidity with 35-mile-an-hour winds out of the southwest. So that pushed the fire for 50,000 acres on 2 fronts. One front going into Chester on the west side of Almanor, and then I think you probably have all seen the news about Greenville on the east side of Almanor. Not just not good news, and it just speaks to when you have a fire of that size, it's just so hard to get enough perimeter around it to protect against these weather events. And they had primary line close to the edge of the fire, and they had secondary line that had already been established. And unfortunately, the fire blew past the primary and the secondary line. So we'll see what goes on with that. A new emerging fire in Placer County in Nevada County, I believe it was, near Grass Valley, near Applegate. It's a little over 2,000 acres, right? 2,400 acres, 0% contained. Structure loss, although they haven't been able to do damage assessment. And anytime you hear the name like river or anything that refers to a river and a fire in a river drainage, it's another one of those things that you worry about, just because where water flow, air flows, where air flows, fire flows. A series of fires in a Klamath, which I'm always concerned when fires are in the Klamath. Nothing fire-wise good ever happens, in my opinion, in the Klamath. It just seems like it's cursed ground. Too many fatalities and lots of tough ground to fight fire. And Shasta Trinity Forest has a significant fire of 20,000 or better acres. And again, no containment. And then there's the Tamarack Fire, which is nearing containment, 78%. but it brings up a very interesting philosophical question, and the catch-22, or the corner that we've painted ourselves into. We know that fire is good for the landscape. We know that at times fire needs to be allowed to burn and be used for resource benefit. But the Tamarack Fire is a good example, is that, first of all, with the lack of forest health that we have, or the poor forest health that we have in the state of California, and where we've put people to live, it's almost to the point that every fire is one weather event away from people. And we've painted ourselves into a corner where we, against our own best judgment, are in a position that we pretty much need to suppress all fire. The Tamarack Fire was a lightning fire that was allowed to burn for 12 days before any significant suppression resources were put on it. It was a combination of resources. It was difficult to access. The firefighters felt it wasn't safe to access, but they also felt that it could be used for resource benefit. And now several homes and lives are endangered. So, and that has spurred the U.S. Forest Service, their new chief, Randy Moore, a mentor of Bruce's, someone that Bruce really respects.
My boss.
His old boss, has said that the U.S. Forest Service will not, for the time being, utilize resource benefits of wildland fires. They're going to suppress all wildland fire right now. And that's a big step for the U.S. Forest Service to take. And I really think it's they are acknowledging it's good science to allow fire to burn, but it's acknowledgement that we're not in a position right now to let fire burn. And so we are going to have to do things like what the MWPA is trying to do to help bring back forest health, so that we can get to the point where perhaps fires could be used for resource benefit. As far as Marin is concerned, just some minor initial attack. We do have a strike team plus 3 single engines out on out of county assignments. Our crew is currently on the Dixie Fire, or the Tam Fire crew, Tam Crew 1, Tam Crew 2. Our dozer for Marin County Fire is covering Sonoma Lake Napa unit for Cal Fire, but we have a great relationship with the Marin Water District, and they rent their dozer that's fire ready to the Marin County Fire Department when our dozer's out. So we have dozer 940 stationed at Woodacre with one of the Marin County Fire Department dozer operators on it. So we still have a bulldozer here available. And we have just a handful of overhead management type positions out and about throughout the state. Moving off of what's going on current fire-wise, I'm really pleased with the growing relationship that we have with One Tam, and also bringing together One Tam with all of the fire agencies. I had made the offer to One Tam to help facilitate the conversation between the One Tam agencies and the fire agencies. And so we're setting up a meeting coming up within the next month or so. We're trying to make it an in-person meeting, followed by another walk like we had on the Lagunitas Rock Springs Road. There's a project that Marin County Fire is doing, not using MWPA funds, but a worthy project that's a good visual description of what we want to be able to have done. So we'll have a meeting of One Tam and the fire agencies together, and then go out, take a walk together and look at this project. I'm very much looking forward to that. Our end of fiscal year closeout is moving forward nicely. Elisa Schiffman and I had a meeting yesterday checking in on what's going on. The progress is good. She likes how simple our budget is right now when it comes, as opposed to a fire department's budget. But so we're making good progress on that. We had draft finance policies that were working draft finance policies. Gene Bonander has been working hard to research and more fully develop our finance policies, blend in what we'd already tentatively approved, taking the notes from our board meeting that had recommendations how to improve the finance policies. Gene and I have had a little bit of a back and forth of sharing information, ideas. After we get that wrapped up, it's going to go to Ann and Elisa to take a look, and then we'll light up the finance committee at the same time that the finance committee will be lit up to look at the end of year, to look at these new financial policies, and then bring to the full board. Another exciting item, records retention policy. You'll be seeing that as a consent item for August. I wasn't sure we were going to have it completely done by the August meeting, but we will. But that's why it wasn't on the draft agenda that was part of this package. I wanted to give an update on our communication strategy. I'm very I'm pleased with the progress that we have made on it. I thought we put a fairly aggressive timeline on it, and I feel that we're on track with that. We have our website contractor on board, already starting to work. We have a tentative framework of what that will look like. We have people building content for it. And our project management tool will be embedded as part of our website. And Anne's been working very hard with specifically Panorama. Panorama has built other project management tools for other clients that they have. They've showed us some examples that are fantastic that we'll be able to blend with other examples that we've used with them. And this project management will really start with project proposal all the way to the end of the completion of the project. And it'll be visually represented on our website, as well as having verbal descriptions on our website. And we have had 2 or 3 meetings already of all the players. That's our web designer, our communication strategist, Pam Kuhn, and our TAM partners with the working on, so we can bring it all together in a nice package. We're pretty much completed with our style guide, and our earned media strategy is working. We're getting more phone calls from the media to get our input on things. And then we also are building the schedule of press releases for an entire year. This is when we're going to be pushing this out. This is when we're going to be pushing this out. And then Megan's working on a social media policy, because we're going to start ramping up our social media presence, and we need to have a solid policy behind that. And then finally, for the communication strategy, we're already starting to build the framework for our annual report. So once the fiscal year is done, the audit is done, we will have a nice end of year report for everyone to look at. Taking a quick breath, grant development. There's a lot of work, and facilitated a couple meetings, and the complexities of the several different 7 or 8 different types of grant programs between our member agencies, as well as what the JPA is offering, created quite a complexity. And we're bringing in Charlotte Jourdain as a person to build how our grant program will work. And there has to be complete coordination between all the member agencies, because there's so much overlap with the JPA's grant program. And then we are working with Fireside to build the application process through an app that can be connected to our defensible space evaluation app. And the vision is that someone gets an evaluation, they go through their report, and that report brings them right to the grant opportunity, should they be available or eligible for those grant opportunities. And then Charlotte will build that system for us, go through a couple rounds of funding, and then we'll be passing it off to someone within the MWPA to manage. Speaking of Charlotte, she's also working on our objectives and metrics. We have the team compiled between Advisory Technical Committee and the Operations Committee, and they have their first meeting scheduled here coming up in a couple of weeks here in August. And they are strategizing around 4 different meetings to be able to work through the objectives and strategies or metrics, so that we can bring it to the board for approval. We have a timeline set for our evacuation and our ingress egress request for proposal risk assessment. We have already assembled the team that we are going to ask to evaluate the proposals when they come in. That way they are on board with the RFP as written and providing some input for the RFP. And we have a couple fire chiefs. We have the executive director from Transportation Authority of Marin on board as one of our evaluators, Department of Public Works director, and some CDA membership. So we really diversified the panel that's going to be reviewing the proposals. And we look to bring the draft RFP to the executive committee at the September meeting, with September board meeting approval to release the RFP, and intend to put a November 30 deadline for proposals to come in. Zonehaven is moving well. We've done all the video shoots for the public media, or the public facing video, and also the fire and law enforcement training video. So those will be pushed out here pretty quick. Our fire inclusion recruitment and education, or Fire Foundry program, is going well. Right now, they're really working out the logistics of how to provide the education to the folks that will be part of that program. And College of Marin has been a fantastic partner so far with UC Berkeley and Stanford, and also the Santa Rosa Junior College is stepping up as well. But I'm really impressed with the knowledge and the drive that's coming from the College Marin. It's going to be a great partnership. Panorama is working on one of their deliverables that was part of the contract, and that is a manual, a CEQA or environmental compliance manual. And they're folding in some of the information from the ESP best management practices. Speaking of that, Ann and I will be having a meeting with ESP next week to talk about our review and where we are in adopting the document that ESP made. And then the last thing I have before I'll hand it off to Ann in case I missed anything, and that's Citizens Oversight Committee. Transfer of chair occurred in our last meeting. So Larry Chu is now the chair of the COC, and Lucy Dilworth is the vice chair. And I think we're going to have a strong team with the chair and vice chair to build their first product, and that is the report following our annual audit. And Larry has developed a great strategy, great list of questions that they need to answer in order to create that report. And this next meeting, they already have an ad hoc subcommittee to design how they want to pursue this report. Now they're actually going to start making some ad hoc subcommittees that'll divide and conquer the work that they need to do in order to produce that product for us. And with that, I'll pass it off to Ann in case I missed anything.
I think that was extremely thorough, Mark. I guess a couple of things that I would add include, a little bit of an update on work plan implementation. We're really excited to have had the board approve in July 4 projects to move forward. One is the chipper program throughout the county, and multiple chipper programs actually. And additionally, several evacuation route projects. So that includes roadside vegetation management along critical evacuation routes. One of those projects in the Central Marin area I'd love to highlight because crews are getting underway now for that work. And so that's really great that we're moving forward with on the ground vegetation management. In addition, I've been working with Panorama and Sequoia, our consultants, and Far Western also, to develop materials and a training program for our crews and our crew leads. And we conducted our first training in the field with crew members and crew leads before the crews got on the ground doing work in the Central Marin area. So we're really excited to have that underway. We've been working on handouts and online materials to use for this, and we're covering biological resources, cultural resources, erosion, and other topics that are really critical for field work, and making sure that they have the phone numbers and for reaching myself and others if any questions come up in the field, so they'll have support throughout the work. And so we're really confident that they're set up for success to make sure that they're implementing all of the best management practices that we're including in our environmental documents. So we're really excited about developing this program. And then we're hoping to have a couple more projects on consent coming up this month for the board to consider. Some of the projects that take a little longer and include multiple partners. Not totally sure which ones are going to make it to the agenda this time around, but hopefully Fire Road work in the San Rafael area, possibly another in the San Rafael area. We'll see how that shakes out. And then probably the long-range acoustical device work in the Southern Marin area. So hoping to have a few projects for consideration coming up this month for the board. And that's it for me.
Great, thank you. This is an opportunity for questions and comments from the committee, and I see Sasha, you have your hand up.
Yeah, excellent and very thorough report as usual from Mark and Ann. Just wanted to note that some of you probably read that article in the Chronicle that noted that the people kind of migrating out of the Bay Area, 40,000 people moved into the WUI. This is a big concern, and I really appreciate Mark, you mentioning that although we want to allow the benefits of fire to happen because there are so many homes within that we have to take a different type of approach. So I think that's something I'd like to kind of hear as that evolves. I'd like to hear you continue to kind of keep us updated on that. So that was my only comment, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Sashi. Other directors, questions or comments? Julie, please.
Thank you. Mark, I'm just wondering what the timing is on the COC audit, when their report will be finished.
So the audit is scheduled from our third-party auditor in September. And so when they anticipate a couple of months of work, the COC anticipates a month or two of work after they receive the audit. But we are working with the COC to deliver the same products that we'll be delivering to the auditor, we'll deliver to the COC as well.
Okay, just one more follow-up. I'm just wondering, the annual report that's part of the communication strategy, what's the timing on that and what's the distribution on that?
We are looking at a soft distribution rather than a hard distribution. Nowadays, I think physical reports are kind of passing away. And we will be looking at probably close to September, October for that report.
Great, thank you. Rachel.
Thank you for the great update. I do have a question around the Zonehaven rollout in the videos. Is MWPA going to be managing that distribution and communication?
We are facilitating the public media campaign. The fire service and law enforcement is facilitating training. They have identified who's going to be the caretakers for the Zonehaven, because it really is time for MWPA to step back in our role of Zonehaven and have the operational folks take the lead. So a lieutenant from the Marin County Sheriff's Office who serves as the op area coordinator for law enforcement is taking point for law, and then the deputy fire chief from Marin County Fire is taking point for fire, and then working closely with the EOC.
If there's any way to continue the messaging, we heard that there's only 20% of Marin County residents who have Alert Marin. And so that we're trying to, yeah, I know.
It's not.
Yeah, Sashi's like, really?
Yeah, sorry, Mark, can you confirm that? Because I think, maybe is that countywide, or because I know that it's, as far as I know, I think it was better in Mill Valley.
I thought we were higher, but it's nowhere near where we need it to be.
And what I heard, and so how that ties in is that I heard from a resident when we were talking about Zonehaven, she said, oh yeah, I heard that that's replacing Alert Marin. And I'm like, wait. So I want to make sure that as the communications are going out, that we're continuing, I'm assuming we're continuing to enforce the messaging around Alert Marin as well as, okay.
There's 3 key points that we're hitting on the public media, on the public facing video. Point number 1 is we have a plan. Point number 2, enroll in Alert Marin. And then point number 3 is know your zone.
Great, perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other questions? Julie.
Yeah, I'm just looking around. I'm looking out my window right now, and there are so many dead trees. Not just in my yard, but throughout the county. And I know it's caused by the extraordinary drought that we're all experiencing, but it seems like it's going to exacerbate an already really dangerous fire season by having all this explosive fuel everywhere. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can do to address that.
Bruce, you want to tackle this one, or do you want me to?
Let me share a couple things that went on. So about a month ago, I initiated a meeting of about 20 folks just to take a look at the landscape, and it was folks in fire chief, UC Cooperative Extension, Representative Mike Sweezy, folks from Marin Water District, a handful of folks, some old foresters like myself and the regional silviculturists who used to look over these things for the state of California, from which came basically alarm, number 1, and some question regarding what messaging we need to work on. The third was a suggestion that we try to get an assessment of exactly what it is that's going on. And so I chased down one TAM, Daniel Franco, and it took about a half an hour, 20 minutes for him to understand what I was talking about. I wasn't talking about insects and disease and pests and trees dying. I was talking about the stressed landscape. In essence, the drought, which we've seen before. Dan, one TAM has contacted NASA and seeking an emergency grant to conduct satellite imagery of Marin and the West Coast. Actually, there are conventions for delineation of drought index. There's 4 categories of stress, and he actually presented a tentative map, which is a map of California at this really tiny scale. You can't tell one thing from the other. But the bottom line is that one TAM, and this is I was going to mention in adding on what TAM is doing. One TAM is taking the lead on the part of Marin County to get the funding for the satellite imagery at probably a 30-meter scale as far as accuracy goes. And what it comes down to is it'll be a color coded. It'll be scarlet, red, orange, yellow, or red, orange, yellow, green. And we're not going to see much green. The map that we've seen is frightening. But so getting some imagery, number one, and then secondly, Mark, with one TAM and the relationship with one TAM and the fire chiefs, it is their purview to bring this to the attention of the fire chiefs. This is not just a Marin County problem, by the way. But so here in Marin, Julie, in response to that is to bring real-time satellite imagery to the fire chiefs to show exactly what it is that's going on. What can be done? This is the purview of the ATC and ops. Mark and I can talk about what we as firemen would have done in doing pre-attack work and prevention work. Your 30 feet should be 50 or 70 feet. Your 5 and 10, your 10 and 15 feet along the road should probably be 25 and 50 feet. But these are it's up to the advisory technical committee to take this information in, consider it, and take the appropriate action. It is happening now. It is real time, and I'm telling you that this is going to be this is a transformational event. That next year we're going to look at this landscape, and it's going to look different. The Pacific Madrone will largely many top dead, and they sprout from the base. So, but what you're going to find is open canopies, dead tops, and sprouting. You're going to have thick leaf litter. It's anyway. So I've been asked to conduct a tour on August 25th. Bill Tyler has asked me to bring together, and I don't know how extensive he wants this to be, but I am going to take battalion chiefs and captains out to the field for observations. And then secondly, our deputy fire chief here we still have to finalize the agenda, but the agenda in essence is observational. What do you see here? And then what are the implications for you as a fireman? The first person on a fire is the incident commander. And it could be Mark, or it could have been me, GS3 or GS15. And you're the guy with the radio, and you're one that calls the shots, and you make observations and you call for resources. These observations are not this is not last year's resource request. This is this year's resource request. And so, Julie, you're asking a fabulous question. There is much in progress. What we can do about it is nothing, because we can't provide water. But what we can do about the work that we're doing, and the hazard mitigation work we're doing, and the wildfire prevention work we're doing, is to change our game. And kind of, as Gretzky says, ski to where the puck is going to be, not where it's been. So there are implications here, Mark. So that's what I have to share. Mark, do you want to make some comments? Or I see that Sashi and Megan both have their hands up.
I was just going to add one thing that I thought was interesting from the very preliminary results. Our eyes tell us that the madrones and the other hardwoods are struggling. But then one of the early results is that conifer forests are struggling even more. And that if you look at the fire behavior that we see on the Dixie and other fires, right out my back window from last year, the conifer forests were just decimated. So it's not just the eye test. Some of it is the science that Danny is bringing in with the NASA imagery.
If I could just mention that Daniel Franco, when I contacted him, contacted NASA, and NASA sent a document out. It is about 25 species that occur in our forest, and they all have been indexed in accordance to where they are as far as drought. Douglas fir is the top. It is the most stressed tree on the landscape. The Pacific madrones that we're looking at and California bays are in the middle, and the oaks are further down. So what Mark's saying, this is where the satellite imagery is going to give us real indication of what is occurring, and we just need to change our game.
I just want to encourage us to not go so deeply into these topics if we can. We're still under just Mark's general reporting, which is, and this is obviously a really valuable conversation. So I would encourage at the end of the meeting, item 11, if we consider adding sort of an update on this for a future agenda item, and potentially announcing that tour you're going to be doing, the August hike, if that's available for people to participate in, just to sort of put it in a place on the agenda where people may notice that there's an event to be announced or a future agenda item to be announced, just so that we can kind of hem in our current discussion a bit.
Thanks, Megan. We just want to solve the world's problems here. So.
And I appreciate Megan saying that. And what I was going to ask, and maybe this can just be noted for the future discussion. I'd love to know the value of satellite imagery versus the LiDAR sampling of fuels that we do for the CWPP. I assume that's a different, there are two different ways of looking at several different ways of looking at a blackbird, but that would be, I'd love to know more about that.
This is specific to drought indexing. LiDAR is not LiDAR is a penetrating picture. It's a whole different wavelength that you use for drought monitoring, Sashi. It's not relevant here. The satellite imagery is state-of-the-art drought monitoring imagery. And I don't know the exact technology, but LiDAR is irrelevant here. Let's see, boy, where were we?
We're wrapping up executive officers report.
So the one other questions, Mark. So I wanted to mention the one TAM drought imagery. The other item is, could you just, this is a question, when you talk about ESP, you'll be meeting with ESP about where we're in adopting, but there's really quite a bit of work going on behind the scenes, not just adopting, but can you just clarify what we're doing as far as reviewing the appropriateness of some of that, and maybe attributing responsibility for some of what is in ESP to other parties outside of MWPA and not using MWPA money?
Yeah, so that is actually the main focus of the review. Is the ESP document has phenomenal best management practices. It's who is responsible for those best management practices is really what the review is pointed towards right now.
Great, thank you, Mike. Thanks for the clarification. So, gosh, we've had any other questions or comments? Should we go to the public then for comments?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thanks. Well, Mark, thank you for a fantastic, and Anne, for all the work that you're doing. Just make pushing so much along here. Let's move on to item 6, which is the consent calendar. So the opportunity for public comment will occur prior to the committee's discussion of the consent calendar. Committee may approve the entire consent calendar with one action. As an alternative, items on the consent calendar may be removed by any committee or staff member for separate discussions and vote. So I'll take public comment on the consent calendar, please, Allison.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay, committee members, yes. Julie.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
All right, motion. Motion second by Rachel. Thank you.
Novato Fire District,
Aye.
County of Marin,
Aye.
City of Mill Valley,
Aye.
Town of Ross,
Aye.
City of San Rafael.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll move on to action items number 7. And this, Mark, this is opportunity to discuss strategic and governance ad hoc subcommittees of the board of directors. So Mark, please.
Thank you. And as part of Bruce's strategy of entering his second year as the president of the board, and the acknowledgement that there's a much different role for the president as we were building the MWPA, as opposed to what the president will be doing when the MWPA is fully built. Bruce created a very comprehensive spreadsheet of what we've accomplished and what we need to accomplish. I've been working to divide the strategy and policy pieces and then put the operational implementation type pieces down below. And Bruce would like to convene an ad hoc subcommittee to look at that document, work with Ann and I to develop that path for the strategy and the policy pieces, and develop the path for the implementation of the operations side. That's the first ad hoc subcommittee. The second ad hoc subcommittee is the governance ad hoc. And while the JPA language and the bylaws describe what the governance should look like, it doesn't really discuss how we move through the process of electing officers, succession planning, transition, so on and so forth. So, if I remember right, it was Rachel who was one of the first ones to recommend this aspect of it. And I think it is a key piece that's missing in how we transition our governance. So we are looking at having a second ad hoc to look at that, make recommendations to the full board. And so what we're looking for from the executive committee today is to solicit any recommendations from you for membership of these ad hoc subcommittees, number one. And then number two, just give some broad leaders intent type direction for the work that these two ad hoc subcommittees would be completing.
Thank you, Mark. Sashi.
It's not totally clear to me what the difference between the two committees are and whether they would work concurrently or successively. Could you clarify, like what's the, sounds like the second one maybe is clear. It's just about kind of the officers, but what's the first one? And would they be successive or concurrent?
I believe in my view, and I lean on Bruce here, they would be concurrent. And the governance is just really focusing on how we elect board members and what board members officers of the board that we should have. Whereas the strategic one will be looking at how do we function as a board, or how do you function as a board towards a strategy and policy decision making, and then help staff create an implementation plan for the operational items that was on Bruce's list.
I think Sashi brings up a good point about it might be one committee. It might be able to put both of those into under one umbrella in terms of it's really board governance altogether, with different tasks to follow up on.
Yeah.
But was there some rationale for separating them out, just that you could share?
Workload, just kind of to spread the workload out. And my recommendation was going to be have different members of the board participate in both of them. And that helps also engage more of our board members in some of these activities.
Yes, Julie, please.
I'm just wondering what kind of work product you're looking for between the two committees. Are we looking to amend the bylaws to have express succession rules as part of the governance?
It could be, for that one, it could be to amend the bylaws, yes, or it could be to create a policy that is in supplement to the bylaws. And I think that would be up to the strategic ad hoc subcommittee to determine that aspect of it. And then that's on a policy level or for the governance. And then for the strategic committee, it would be probably helping Ann and I to create an implementation plan for all the operational aspects of building out the MWPA. And then looking at how the creating, and this could be another policy that is attached to the bylaws of how the board will be functioning in its governance role of, rather than being building, staying right at the policy level. Because prior to us having any MWPA staff, the board really had to at times function as staff. And we're getting into that transition point where the board can be true policy makers.
So it really falls under board governance, all those pieces, the role and responsibilities of the board.
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, so
Go ahead.
it sounds like maybe not like
Sasha, go ahead. And
I'm sorry.
Dennis
Didn't mean
next.
to-
Yeah, Sasha.
Well, it sounds like it's not all governance. I mean, there's a clear kind of, how do we elect officers? Are there, is there a term limit? Is there kind of some expectation around, that's clearly governance, but the other stuff is other kind of policy level things. And I'm hearing, Mark, that you're saying that helping the board kind of move from more of a, startup-y kind of hands-on thing to moving into having more of the policy view that we really should have going forward now that we're more established. Is that?
Yes, well said.
Correct. Okay.
Hi, Dennis, please.
Hi, thank you. So I sort of agree that I think this could be one subcommittee. I think we do want to involve as many other board members as possible. So we might want to just determine, like, initially how many members of the executive committee might serve on that committee, and make sure there's opportunity for other board members. So we address that issue. But I think one committee makes sense. And I look at this more of a demand on staff also. Having two committees is certainly much more difficult and much more demanding than one committee probably. And staff can work with that committee to highlight what needs to be addressed first, second, so on, so that they can work out the schedule. But I sort of support the one committee idea, and also want to involve as many board members as possible too. So.
Megan, if we have two committees, we still have to have concerns about quorum, right? So even if we wanted to have more people involved, we would still have, would that allow for more people who are on other committees to be like, if there were several of us, more than a quorum of us who wanted to be involved in the two committees, would we be able to do that because you couldn't do that if you had one?
That's true. That I'm thinking of this as I think as the staff report was saying, that it would be Bruce appointing, sort of choosing members to participate. And it will just depend on the size of each. So if this is planned as an ad hoc temporary committee that wouldn't be a Brown Act committee, it would just be a one single task to come back and provide this sort of final product with a recommendation to the board. So as long as it's less than a quorum of the board, then as long as we have, the majority of that less than a quorum, we're okay, depending on whether you do one or two committees. But it does sound like the one committee may be workable. It could be as many as 7 members, I believe.
But we don't have to worry about quorum of the executive committee is what I'm wondering.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't want to have more than 2 of you on it. It gets a little, I think we have to think of it as a committee of the board. And yes, but just so that we don't have that conflict of having 3 of you on, that would be an advisable thing, definitely. Sorry, I wasn't following your question initially.
My question also. Julie.
I'm just wondering, Mark, if you have an opinion about whether one committee covering lots of issues or 2 committees covering, more manageable issues is better. Which is better for staff?
Either one is going to be a workload. My initial vision was that Ann and I would both participate with a strategic, and then workload wise, I would not have Ann participate in the governance So that was one way I was going to help with the staff workload there. I can make an argument both ways, but I think, especially with the executive committee quorum issue, that having two actually makes sense because of that aspect. That's, like I said, I can make an argument either way. It's the quorum of the exec that leans me towards two. And
yeah, I just make a comment here that my observations have been that I think the two committees are really quite different. The planning, strategic planning committee is, this is all about, annual work planning and working, supporting Mark and Ann in making sure that all the moving parts are lined up and clearly defined on a calendar of the definition of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, who's going to do it. There's also a staffing component that I think that team is going to have to take a look at and to look back at the entire work plan. And I think the strategic planning group really is going to meet different minds, different skill sets, and a much bigger undertaking, as opposed to the governance is also different minds. And the talent that we have on this executive committee, for example, we have several highly experienced folks that have dealt with civic governance who probably aren't interested in, and we'd want to tap into so we can get their content, their recommendations. So I would advocate as a comment. I think that as a comment, I think we'd be able to tap into more board talent and more executive talent, and then committee and more board talent if we were to have two, and with a commitment to really, as far as the staff work, Mark and Ann, I think the products are going to be manageable for you. The work, whether it's one or two committees, I think you're still going to get the same quantity of work. So, but with exception to meetings, but I'm for tapping as much talent we can and pulling as many people as we can to get this stuff done. So,
and I think if we go with two ad hocs, I think 5 is a good number for each of those. So that brings 10 board members involved in the loop of that. Whereas we would have to tap out at 8 if we were to have one. And then that 8, only 2 of them could be executive committee members.
That sounds good to me. And we can, I guess, take this to the public here in a moment, but I guess what we're looking for is this is a discussion item because it's within discretion under the bylaws, to appoint ad hoc committees, but we want to do this in an informed way with your support, of course. Any other comments?
I just agree with what you're saying, Bruce. I think 2 committees are better. I think they are separate issues. I think one is discrete board governance and the other is, much broader. And I think to the extent we can involve more people on the board and make them feel more vested and more informed, I think that's always a good thing.
Great. Thank you, Julie. And I see head shaking. Okay. Should we ready to take it to the public then, Allison?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay. So back to the committee again. Any further discussion? Sashi, yes, please.
I think the strategic committee is the one that seems to be a little more vague in its scope, and if we could get that tightened up a little bit before the appointment there, I think that would make things a little easier for people to.
Yeah, thank you, Sashi. If I just may say that at our last board meeting, Mark mentioned about there were 2 products that have been developed. One is a chronicling of the 43 items that moving parts are moving forward, and who the lead was last year, who the lead would be this year, and who we look as we wrap some of these things up. The other item was, and by the way, I just want to credit a number of board members have contributed to that. Julie made substantial contributions to that long list of verbs, things in motion. Dennis also. The other item was it was 16 big initiatives that we have that are moving. You know, we're juggling 16 things right now. Mark and Ann are juggling. We're here. We're on the perimeter. You know, on the bounds. But that's really for me, the strategic product is in essence putting together a work. It is really putting together a plan of work, because we got 16 things floating, but we don't have a work plan. We don't have them written down anywhere. We don't have due dates. We don't have clear responsible parties. We've also asked Mark and Ann about the adequacy of staffing between the two of them. How are you going to get all this stuff done? People have asked, why didn't we do the evacuation modeling 4 months ago? People asked for, well, we never really set things onto a calendar. So the product is a plan of work that Mark and Ann can commit to, and also a package where Mark and Ann can articulate the breadth of stuff, the depth of stuff, and their competency, their capability to get things done, and to come to the board for perhaps to ask for some support. But I would say that rather than discuss it all here, let us commit then to putting words on paper as to what these products are. And as we reach out to the executive and board members, that we have a specific plan of work, a deliverable. We'll articulate exactly what that deliverable is. If that'll be helpful. I'm seeing head shaking. Okay, so Mark and Ann, we'll get that done then, right?
Yes, we will.
Okay, thanks. Let's move on to board directors meeting agenda review, item number 9. Mark, you can talk to us about the agenda, the draft agenda.
We actually have item number 8 to hit first.
And Bruce,
Where am I?
Bruce,
I'm
I'm
sorry,
sorry
yeah, I
to
jumped.
interrupt.
ATC.
Did you take public comment on that last item? You did. Okay, I didn't check it off my list, so I just wanted to double check. Thank you.
So Mark, we're moving on to item number 8. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the advisory technical committee, the language as displayed in the staff report, the JPA language allows for at-large non-voting membership of the advisory technical committee. And there were a lot of people that were desirous of being on the ad hoc subcommittee or at an advisory technical committee for that reason. But we wanted to give the ATC an opportunity to go through a full planning cycle, learn about what their work really is and how they're going to accomplish that work, and then make a recommendation, an informed recommendation of who they felt should be at-large non-voting members of the advisory technical committee. So now that they've gone through that full year, I've been able to connect with the chair, Fire Chief Ruben Martin, and our recommendation is that our 4 large land management agencies, Marin County Parks and Open Space, California State Parks, NPS, and Marin Municipal Water District, are the people that we feel should have seats on the advisory technical committee. And how it would go is the board has to approve that, and then we can reach out to those land management agencies and say, who do you think is the best person from your organization to be on this seat? I think this is really going to help open up communications. Quite frankly, I think some of our land management agencies were surprised with some of the projects that were proposed, while we encouraged our member agencies to make sure they connected with the land management agencies. I'm not sure that connection always was made. So this will help with that connection. And also our land management agencies have a tremendous amount of resources that they can bring to help with development of those projects. So I think that's, and it was envisioned that as you saw in the language, envisioned that our land management agencies probably should have a seat at that table. And then we have a recommendation that a member from the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership should have a seat in there. And the recommendation is because if we can have best management practices baked into the project proposal phase and tap into ESP for that subject matter expertise, then when it comes time to the scope and implement that project, we've already got a lot of the best management practices built in. It streamlines and makes our compliance process more efficient.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Dennis and then Julie.
Thanks, Mark. I think this is a great idea. question I have, if you thought about National Park Service, I would encourage a representative from both the Point Reyes and the GGNRA. I work with them weekly, and they're very different organizations and sometimes don't talk together. And so I think offering at least to both, and I think you can do this under what you're recommending because they're both National Park Service, but I would certainly consider a representative from both of those national park units. So
That's a great point, and you're right. They are, while they are both NPS, they are two distinct entities.
Thank you, Dennis. Great suggestion. Julie McMillan, please.
I'm just wondering if PG&E should be in that.
That's with the amount of vegetation management work that they are doing concurrently.
Yeah. And the amount of stuff that they've,
That's a great suggestion, Julie.
That is, and this is why we put this in on as an information item, because it'll be part of the agenda for the board, so that we can add PG&E, and we can make sure that GGNRA and Point Reyes National Seashore is spelled out in the staff report.
Great.
Great suggestion. Sashi, please.
And just to be clear, this is the membership of this committee is voted on by the board. So if we're saying, like, for example, the Ecological Sound Practices Partnership has a non-voting seat, who that particular person is would be up to a vote of the board. Like if there was, I assume that group is going to kind of get together and pick somebody, but if there's some sort of dispute about that, it's our board who decides. Is that correct? Or
The way I read the language, and Megan can give me a better review, but it seems like the board recommends the organization recommends the person.
okay, so that means that person could shift from meeting to meeting, or from for any of the organizations. Is that?
Yeah, the only guidance in that language is that it says that members shall be appointed by their respective organizations. So
Got it. Okay, so
presumably that organization could keep changing their representative, but that would be difficult, I think, for everybody.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Rachel, please.
Sort of along the same line, is the expectation then, I mean, that the organization's appointing somebody would be a staff member of that organization versus a volunteer? And if so, do we need to put that into the language?
I think I would lean on the language of the JPA, where it talks about the advisory technical committee, and for the land management agencies, that's an easy one. It would be a staff member. It's for the ESP that might be a little bit more difficult, as opposed to a staff member versus a volunteer. So I think we would, the entire ecologically sound practices is a volunteer group.
Entirely.
And I guess that sort of leads to the question of, if we open it up to, Audubon Society, Sierra Club, at what point do we say it's ESP, which I understand, because today they're really focused on the work similar type of work that we're doing. But I don't know 10 years from now, is that going to be the case? And so I just want to make sure that as we're doing, the other agencies, absolutely, they have a professional engagement in the county and everything else. So I'm a little bit concerned, because every agency can take in the information from ESP and use that information. I don't know if it's necessarily appropriate to have a seat at the table. And I know it's a non-voting seat, but everyone can have a non-voting participation because the meetings are open. So I just want to make sure that if we're saying ESP, then are we going to get the request from other organizations? What is OPA? OFA? Bell.
Yeah.
Because it could definitely open that up. So I just want to make sure that with that thought, we're doing eyes wide open.
Well, and I think that the idea was that these were land managers, right, as opposed to subject matter experts that could be consulted by staff at any time. So what does it say in the JPA language on as far as that?
It's fairly broad. It just, in addition, relevant Marin County land management agencies, private companies, and community organizations may be invited by the board. And it is invited by the board to participate at large. So it ultimately is the decision of the board to say, these are the organizations we want to have participate. But the JPA language itself is fairly broad in terms of what beyond land management, it could be just community organizations and private companies as well. Meaning PG&E may be appropriate, but whether how you'll draw the boundaries around which community organizations may be the most difficult, I would imagine.
And is this adding them to this list? Is that adding by what means is it adding? Is it like, is there like some sort of bylaw adjustment, or is that like, is this something that can be modified at any time by the board?
It's not as specific as that. I believe so, because it just, the language itself just says that the board may invite these non-voting members to participate from these different organizations. So the board could decide to make a policy around this that kind of specifies how these will be selected, and that, go into a little bit more detail about how that process would happen, potentially as part of that governance committee. But I think that with the language here, it doesn't specify whether, I don't think that if the board invite someone in, is that a permanent position, an organization or not? There's no specificity as to that in the JPA language, but presumably the board could unwind whatever it decides to initiate initially, because it doesn't make it a permanent seat necessarily. So you could.
I think we should consider that that a larger policy question before we add a non-land manager into the mix.
Rachel, please.
In looking at the ESP membership, it seems that many of the same agencies are represented as part of the ESP membership. So if there's somebody who from their list of ESP members, then we have sort of a double count, I guess. I'm not quite sure. So I think back to Sashi's comment about maybe we need to think about that one.
Well, I do want to make sure that we're speaking the same thing here.
Yeah.
With the recommendation of ESP, it would be one member from the ESP coalition rather than one member from each of the members of the ESP.
Yeah, I think that's clear, but I think Rachel's question is, does that then open up all of those individual organizations to be able to say, no, actually, we would like to be there because we really have some valuable information to offer, and we have a very specific kind of, yes, we participate in ESP, but we have this other, and I think that they would have justification to all of them request that, and we would have to then deal with that. So
I think this is, I just want to speak, having been a part of ESP. I have participated in 36 of the 40 meetings as a content matter specialist. That, ESP has spent literally probably several staff hours, thousands of hours focusing on partnering with us and making sure that we're achieving wildfire prevention in an ecologically sound way. Simple said. They've brought together a coalition. There are about, I think, maybe a dozen entities that came forth and really put their shoulders into this. And yes, they come from their respective walks of life, federal, state, local, educational, active environmentalists, et cetera, but they all came in to provide subject matter expertise on vegetation management, defensible space work, carbon and biomass management. And I think what they're asking, ATC, the ATC they're the people that build us out. We're here to set policy and governing, and ESP has expressed interest in participating in the development of project plans and work plans. And this is the place where the ATC has said this is the place for a ESP representative to sit in when we talk about projects. I feel that it's logical to this is the ATC asking for a representative that they can sit and talk to face. I think we're overanalyzing this. We as a board can change our mind. And we can, and when if we get a dozen requests, the answer is just say no. We say no. So, we're empowered here. First of all, I think we're empowering ATC to determine how they best interface with this group of volunteers who came in as subject matter experts. Nobody came in with their badges on. All badges were left at the door. Hats, badges. So anyway, I feel that the ATC's recommendation is reasonable. We as a board are empowered to do this according to Megan. And it will be likely one representative of the steering committee, and I suspect it's going to be Bell Cole, but I don't know. It could be Mike Sweezy, but it's likely going to be Bell Cole, and who wears about 1,000 hats. But in this, she would be bringing forth, bringing any issue. So I feel like we're overanalyzing it, and we have the power to say no. Those are my comments. Julie.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think involving ESP sooner rather than later is consistent with why we hired Panorama in the first place, which is to collaborate and to solve problems as early as possible, rather than having them fester into, big controversies and ultimately lawsuits. So I think involving ESP at this level is, as a non-voting member, is a really good way to address issues as early as possible. And if it's not working, we can go back and tinker with it.
Yeah, we can change our decision, and we could say that we'd like to approve this, and let's give it 6 months and see how it works. Or let's see how it works, and for whatever term, Mark and Ann, you think is logical to assure that the ATC is getting the direct involvement of Bell's team, and not there are actually 70 people that are in the ESP original list, and again, I want to say that everyone left their badges at the door. But what they did is they brought their URL links to state-of-the-art products, to science, to peer-reviewed plant lists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm commenting again that I'm supportive of this, but I think we're probably getting into discussion.
I do have a question. So we've had this come up multiple times. The ESPP is not run by MWPA. Is that correct? Even though that the only place you can find it is on the MWPA website, but this is a separate entity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct.
And, our website will be changed. Rather than having a page that's the ESP partnership, it's going to be a partnership page that represents all of the partnerships that we have on it, and the ESP will be represented on that. And then ESP is off on the side right now developing their own website, so we would simply link to their website.
Okay.
And then I guess Mark mentioned that the Panorama and Sabrina are in the process of reviewing the 21-page ESP document for that which is appropriate. They're going to draw some hard lines that this is CEQA and this is wildfire prevention. And then they're going to, and there's going to be some hard lines that these are not these are not wildfire prevention, and other parties are going to have to take some responsibility for it. So I believe this isn't going to be just 16 independent members coming in and asking for something. I do believe that Ann and Mark will have a clear, the manual that is in the process of being developed by Panorama is going to incorporate that of ESP, which is appropriate for MWPA, and defining that which is not appropriate for MWPA. So we're going to have a fairly clear roadmap of what that course is, what's in and what's out. And then I feel like this is not going to be a free-for-all, and it's not going to be a my organization says this, or what I say. And so I mean, to respond to the fact that yes, there are multiple environmental organization affiliations of ESP members, but short story is, I think we're going to have a clear roadmap of what is in, and that the forum will allow ATC and Mark and Ann to make, if ESP asks, well, what about this and what about that? You know, it's an opportunity to do it early, identify issues and problems and fix them. It's not going to be a free for all, and we're not going to get yanked into something that is completely inappropriate and outside of our purview. I'm confident that it could work. Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I appreciate your input and your efforts in terms of attending all those meetings. I do think they would be a logical group to have at the ATC, especially since the ATC is basically asking for them. And they have been involved from the get-go, many of them even before the get-go in the ballot and everything else. So I think it would be important to have them. And I do agree, getting this information early and upfront makes a huge difference when you're planning. So it'd be a good place to have them. And I think they're appropriate. And as you said, Bruce, if others make requests to join, we certainly refuse them membership at this point, because the board has control. So
thank you,
thank
Dennis. Hi, Rachel. Yes, please.
No, I do appreciate the work of ESP and all the participating agencies as part of ESP. And it would be helpful to look back, Bruce, of those, 36 of 42 meetings you've attended, which is amazing, to see, are they fully represented? Like, are the refuse for biohazard, biomaterials, like, is everyone really represented? So we feel comfortable that as ESP is speaking and providing that input, that they're fully representing all those agencies? Or do we need to relook at that list and see if there are other agencies that should be also invited? And so I'll leave it at that in terms of, ESP is definitely makes a lot of sense. And obviously more people at the table to provide input earlier and sooner is always better. But I want to make sure that as that input comes through, we know that is it really representative of all these different agencies?
Interesting point. The question of these were people that volunteered to come forth and put together a set of principles and practices. Again, they left their badges at the door. They came to the table as hydrologists, ornithologists, soil scientists, fisheries biologists, botanists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They brought their expertise. Rachel, I don't know that the intent was for them to represent their agency or their organization. Their intent was to bring ecological principles, ecologically sound practices to the table. So I think it's a mischaracterization of representation. And again, I was in all these meetings.
No, I know, and Bruce, I totally respect that. But coming in new to this, and I read the list that's only available on MWPA, that's the message I take out. And so I appreciate that explanation, but that explanation is not available on the site. So I took away as just the general consumer of it.
Yes, yeah.
And so if this is not accurate and it's individuals representing on a volunteer basis and have great knowledge and input, that's great. Let's have that list up.
Yeah, that's reality.
Right. So, I mean, I didn't know that. So I appreciate that.
Well, and I think your point that you just said, Bruce, about it's not about representative of agencies, but about having certain expertise. I think that would be great to have codified somewhere.
And it is, Rachel, and your point is well taken. And the questions abound. Who is ESP and what are they and what did they represent and what did they put together? There's been a tremendous amount of fear that they were going to capture the stage and control, and I think it's been problematic from the beginning, and it's become more so more recently. But I do think Mark, Mark is working, and Ann now are working directly with ESP. Is that those questions that really need to be the group has done they pushed their product over the threshold, and now we are reviewing it. I do think this is an opportunity to answer Rachel's question and Tashi's question and clarification as to who we are, what we've put together. It is there's some public image issues here too, Mark. So maybe there's some communication piece that could be put together that would address Rachel's very valid question. Very valid.
Agreed. And I do think we're getting to the point where we probably should be reaching out for public comment. And then before we do that, I was just going to mention that the development of the website that is owned and maintained by ESP can really help answer a lot of those questions, I think.
And I would suggest, Rachel, to answer your question, and Mark, is that there's a list of the 70 people. About, again, there were maybe 12, a dozen or so who were really deeply involved, but it was a name, and then their expertise was a second column, their expertise. And then there was an affiliation was the last thing. So it wasn't affiliation and expertise, it was in that order. We need to communicate better as to what this is. Genuine, what's the word? Genuine substantive contributions to make our product better and responsive to leaving. And there's one line in our bylaws that describes about Mark, and you could probably quote it, I can't remember anymore, but there's one line in our bylaws that is the context for their involvement, and it is about ecologically sound practices and to address essentially leave the environment in a better place.
Yeah, it's the second recital in our JPA language.
Yeah. Thanks for your genuine concerns. Are we ready to go out to public comment, Mark? Or
I think so.
You want to say something?
I was going to say that I think we're ready for public comment.
Thank you. Allison.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for thoroughly vetting this one. Well done. Julie.
I just wanted to make a comment that there's no precedent for this kind of arrangement. And maybe that's why it's hard to think about it, because there is no precedent. And so that kind of puts it in context. And we are trying something new and, pushing the envelope.
And I thank you. And I want to make a comment. I gave a presentation to the Governor's Office of Planning Research, the planners around the state, about 4 months ago, and told them what we were doing here at MWPA, and including the ESP. And the response from the planners around the state was, you're sitting down with people in the environmental community in advance and developing a set of principles and practices. And it was a wow, and good for you. And we wish we had done it. Anyway, I think, and this is the byproduct of, I think Jason Weber, it was his vision and Bill's, and we are in kind of uncharted territory. So continuing to make this work is unprecedented. And, we're trying to make important, intelligent decisions that are going to make things right. I think empowering the ATC to give it a try, and let's Mark and Ann, please keep it on our radar as how that is going.
And then just as an example of perhaps the opposite paradigm is here in my home county of Sonoma County, where there's PG&E funding that's being granted for community groups to do vegetation management. And there was just an article in yesterday's or 2 days ago's Press Democrat where the projects are held up because they can't go through the environmental compliance process.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas none of our projects are being held up because we have this partnership and we have Panorama on board and we're efficiently getting through the compliance.
Okay. So, boy, again, very thorough discussion. Thanks, everybody. Let's should we any further discussion? Okay, thanks. Now we're on item 9, Mark.
Now we're on 9. So there's a couple items that were not placed on the agenda, draft agenda yet, just because I wanted to see how things panned out with this. So we'll obviously have an action item for the advisory technical committee added to the agenda. There will be a couple more consent items, the retention policy, and perhaps a couple of environmental documents that will be added. And then I think the last piece that could be added is dependent upon agenda item 10 of today's meeting. But other than that, I'm open for any questions for the board or comments, concerns for the board agenda for our August.
So questions or comments from directors on the August 29th, 19th agenda? I see none. Oh, wait, Julie.
Sorry, on number 7B, where it says that the board review and provide input on the work plan update. What is the work plan update? What's the scope of that?
That's Ann having just a staff report of saying it's just a monthly update for the board to listen to where we are with the work plan and filling us on in.
So maybe it's more of a status instead of, because I see update and I think, oh, we're changing the work plan. Maybe it's just a status report.
And you're the second person to have a similar question, so we definitely need to change the wording of that agenda item.
Okay. Other questions or comments? No. Seeing none, out to the public, please.
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there is no public comment.
Okay. Back to the committee again for discussion. And seeing none. Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you, Mark. We'll move on to item number 10. This is a suggested item, director's matter, as a possibility, putting director's matters on meeting agendas. Directors to Mark, you can explain this.
Yeah.
So it's for us to deliberate on. Yes, thank you.
Happy to. So, I mean, you guys know better than I do. Councils and the boards typically have an expression period for their members, but they're typically 5-member boards. And that's the thing that I think we're going to have to be cognizant of. And however, our 17-member board of directors is an excellent opportunity to share vital information at the policy level between the different towns. Perhaps it's an ordinance that one town is passing that the other towns should, or town, cities, and fire district boards should be informed of. So, but as we all are imagining 17 board members taking a minute to minute and a half, it could add up to 25, 30 something minutes. And so I think we need, if we go down the path of having directors matters, then we really need to have some well-defined parameters of what that content is. And a recommendation is it would not be necessarily updates about what projects, even if they're wildfire related projects that are going on in a particular town. I think we really need to focus on policy level type conversation. And then the other questions would be, do we have each board member have an opportunity? Do we roll call them? Do we break it up into 5 geographical areas, and there's a representative from 5 geographical areas that poll the agencies from within their geographical areas and make a generalized report? And then something that's not on the staff report that Bruce and I were discussing this morning as we prepared for today's meeting was perhaps it's an agendized item. So if, for instance, and my eye went straight to Rachel, so I'll use Rachel as an example. Perhaps Rachel has something she wants to share. So she says, hey, Mark, I would like an agenda item under Directors Matters to share this item. And then I think that really allows Rachel the opportunity to formulate what she's going to say, be concise, and have a vetting process to make sure that it's on topic. And so with that, I'm looking for you guys to provide direction of, and to me, that there's 2 questions that we have to answer today. Question number
Thanks.
1.
Go ahead, Mark. Yes, again.
Now, do we have a director's matters item on the agenda? That's question number one. Question number two, if yes to number one, how do we proceed?
How do we proceed?
Forward?
Thank you, Mark. Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for the agenda item. You know, I do think this opportunity is important to allow the directors to have a time on the agenda to make some comments. But I do think it's important with a board this large to restrict that to some time limit. Or what I've found is in large boards that I've been on, if the opportunity is up front in the agenda, early in the agenda, you end up with a lot of people wanting to talk for a very long time. But if you do it last on the agenda, after the action items, when everyone's kind of worn out, that quite honestly, it's only the real important things that come up. So I think location on the agenda is really important.
Interesting.
And I also think it's important for the opportunity, but I do think it's important to think through how you want this to happen and the procedure around it, because electeds can get very winded at times. And believe me, sitting in the ABAG meetings with 35 members, elected people who want to talk, it's amazing, and they don't limit them to time. And even though there are time limits, they don't limit it. And at midnight, that usually on those nights, you regret that it was first up on the agenda. So anyway.
Thank you, Dennis. Really great comments. Julie, please.
I like forcing the director to contact Mark in advance and putting it on the agenda. I don't think we want this to become a free-for-all. And I think by putting it on the agenda, it's going to it's going to, create an opportunity for the director to talk to Mark, which is always good. And then it's going to force the person to make sure that it's a relevant item. And hopefully they will craft their remarks in a concise way so as not to, take up a bunch of time. And I totally agree with Dennis. Putting it at the very end when everyone is fried is a really good strategic move. So that's great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. Rachel, Sashi. Rachel, please.
Sure. I also feel that it's important. I mean, I try to check in with our fire chief, anyone who's participating on the tech committee or the ops committee, and our city manager of, is there anything I should know and can bring forward? And so I think it's using that same type of process with this is, what would you like the other cities to know of what's happening in San Rafael? And so I think it should be very, very clear and directed. And I may be changing, instead of just matters, it's really policy city updates or city policy updates or something, change the description a little bit about what it is. So it's very clear in the title.
Wonderful comment, Rachel. If I just may add on to what you just said, updates relevant to MWPA's core work. That would inform our work. So I like what you just stated there, but and just add that is relevant, because there's a lot of stuff going on that's just not timely or critical or necessarily, it's interesting, but not compelling and not going to change anything. So it's a really great comment. Sashi.
Yeah, I definitely think it's good to have a spot for this. Another approach could be that you could time limit that section. The board chair could set a time limit for that section. Like, so we do that with public comments, public open time. We set a certain amount, and then if there's more than that, we put it at the end of the agenda. So that's another way to limit it. But I think what we're hoping to limit it by is topics that are board level, policy level type things that like if there's something happening in Mill Valley or in San Rafael at a staff level, then that should come up at operations or at ATC. It shouldn't come up at the board level. So some of that is going to be kind of training us to sort of think that way, because we're in a slightly different mode, kind of being in the startup phase there. So I think we should also kind of be prepared for some amount of, shaping of that as we go. And maybe we could also recommend that any board member who has director matters share them with Mark before the meeting. Of course, if there's something that happens like that day, great, but maybe that could also be part of it. And Mark's point about having it be agendized would lean that way as well.
Yes.
But I also, my only caveat is that I wouldn't want to restrict the ability of a board director to say something that maybe is not totally mainstream or controversial. Something where they want to bring something to the board. I wouldn't want there to be so many constraints around it that somebody wasn't able to bring something they thought was really quite important to the board.
Thank you, Sashi. Mark, it seems like you're getting fairly consistent set of input. I believe that all board members should be, first of all, Mark's kind of our nerve center. And, Mark and Ann are the ones that are really, interacting with all the moving parts and all the parties. I really believe that Mark should be the place to go if a director has something they want to say, that they ought to mention to Mark, and it should be vetted as appropriate and timely and relevant, and then agendize. I'm concerned about just an open mic. That anyway, unless something is really urgent and timely and earth-shakingly relevant. So anyway, I'm all for. I think we're saying something consistent, which is to promulgate a policy here where directors' matters are directed to Mark in advance of the meeting. Mark would vet them for that's timely and appropriate and relevant, and then agendize it. And then Mark, it seems like you would be the one that would preside over this agenda item. Julie.
I'm just listening to this, and would we then have to take public comment on the matters that the directors are commenting on? Megan?
Yes, if they're listed as an agenda item separately.
Okay.
Good. Thanks for the clarification, Julie.
Concision and relevancy are really important here.
Yeah. Okay.
And might be a good time here before I kind of summarize what I've heard to go to public comment.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Allison?
I'm looking for any raised hands from our audience members. And there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Thanks all who are listening. Mark,
So
back to you.
to summarize what I've heard today, and I'm going to start with Rachel's suggestion about the name of the agenda item perhaps could help. And so I jotted down Director's Member Agency Policy Update. Does that kind of point us in the right direction?
Can you please add relevant to MWPA? What?
I think that
Relate
the only
related.
issue there is that it makes it seem like if I saw that, I would feel like I should come up with something like that is, oh, I need to make sure I give a policy update this time if it's to do my duty there. So that seems to invite every single director to give a policy update. That's my only concern about that.
Let me noodle on something, a good name for that, and I'll see what I can get for a landing spot.
Sounds good.
And I definitely hear the late in the agenda. I envision it to be after the information items. That's relatively late, just prior to request for future agenda items. And then if we agendize it, then I'll need to share a process with the board members, because what I try to typically do is close out any of our staff reports and agenda items, close the business to Thursday prior to the board meeting. That way I can push the agenda out to you guys on that Friday morning. So I would have to make sure that all the board members knew that Thursday before the board meeting is the day that we would have those items.
The way we have for public open time, there's like a little blurb. I wonder if Megan could write a little blurb for that, because this is essentially directors' public open time, right? Like, so that it's clear that, there's not an intention that the board discusses items that are brought up here. And
That's a great idea. And that could also provide for that public comment option just one time at the beginning of the item rather than following each director's announcement.
And it brings in Bruce's relevance to MWPA. It could be built into that paragraph there rather than the title. That's a great idea. So Megan and I will get together, work on the title of the agenda item and then the blurb that goes with that agenda item.
Sounds good. Head shaking once again, up and down. Wonderful. Okay, well, that's wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Looks like we're gonna enrich our dialogue here a little bit. Let's move on to item 11. Request for any future agenda items. Any requests for items from the committee members here?
And pursuant to Megan's suggestion, perhaps add an update on the drought stress of our force as an agenda item so we can get a deeper dive into that conversation.
Yes, and this may be, I think we're going to want to invite Daniel Sanchez, possibly someone that's dealing with remote sensing imagery, the grant application to NASA, someone that can speak in technical terms as far as what, and then Mark, then again for the ATC and ops, I just want to, you know, how this information is shared.
Well, if we do it we could, I see a couple different ways we could do it. Number one, we can have it as a separate agenda item at the executive committee meeting. And then we can share that recording and encourage the ops and ATC to watch the recording and then make it even easier and say from this time to this time. And that's number one. Number two, second option would be perhaps in our September board meeting, that's the board education item.
Okay, sounds good. That sounds good. I'm just really concerned that, you know, we as board members, we're not the boots on the ground, and that it's really the purview of ATC and the fire chiefs to really consider what the implications are. I know you're dealing with all, so you'll inform the ATC of this ongoing work, and they should plug themselves in at whatever time and place is most appropriate so that they can, you know, integrate and adopt appropriately.
Yeah, and I can help facilitate any more connections of the fire service, and then especially, and you have that August 25th endeavor that I think is going to help make that connection as well.
Okay, we'll get back.
Mark, if you're going to bring that forward as an education item in September, something that came up at our council meeting, I asked our city manager to comment on Monday. I've been getting a lot of people in the public asking, what are you doing as far as, you know, watering fields and, like, you know, public things like during the drought, and you know, the different jurisdictions are taking different actions that might be contributing to the you know, the dead tree issue, or, you know, so it would be great to have that go back through ops and have them you know, just kind of connect those dots with the parts of their organizations that might, you know, public works or parks or something like that, that might have a nexus there. And then maybe it would be good to have, once they do that, that could be folded into that September update. You know, oh, by the way, you know, the fire chiefs are working with, you know, parks maintenance and open space, and, you know, to make sure that drought watering procedures and use of recycled water or whatever are not adding to the problem when they're, you know.
It's a difficult balance.
Yeah, but I think that might be a nice place to have that update
Okay.
if you're going to do that in September.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sashi. Okay, it looks like requests. I think we're ready to move on. So item number 12, 11:39, August 5th, 2021. Time to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for your very thoughtful contributions. Some really good discussion, good analysis. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
I know.